Hello, my name is Steve Pretty. I'm a musician, composer and performer from London, and welcome to my podcast, Steve Pretty on the Origin of the Pieces. This is the show that helps you to hear, understand and enjoy music in new ways. Hello everyone, it's lovely to be back in your ears. Once again, a little bit of a delay since the last episode, and that's becoming a bit of a refrain, I know, in recent episodes, as a variety of reasons which I've been through in the past, mainly around being busy, but this time also I had a bit of computer failure, which is just a nightmare because obviously as a freelancer, you don't have the infrastructure of an organisation and an IT department to call up when something goes wrong. I have backup computers and things that I can work on if need be, but it just means that everything takes longer, so I've had to do a complete reinstall of everything on my computer and all of that. So yeah, things have been a little bit stressful on that front, but a lovely few weeks work and playing and music making for me. I've been doing some really nice travelling, which I'll talk more about over the coming weeks. Hope you're all doing really well. I've met a few of you guys around and about in the last few weeks, and it's been really nice catching up on what you enjoy about the show, what you think can be tweaked and all of that business. So yeah, thank you very much for that feedback. As always, do keep the feedback coming, and as always, if you're enjoying the show, please do review it, please do subscribe to it, and most importantly of all, spread the word to your friends and family. Word of mouth is incredibly important to shows like this. We've also got a few new members on Patreon. It's lovely to see some new people there. So on the last episode, I spoke to a fantastic musician originally from Syria, but now based in Norway, by the name of Nawar Al-Nadaf. And we talked about the oud, we talked about the ney, the flute, the sort of side-blown flute. If you pop to the Patreon, you can see me attempting to play the ney quite badly from out of the corner of my mouth. I really enjoyed chatting to Nawar, and again I've had a lot of lovely feedback about that interview and how interesting it was to learn about these instruments from the Middle East. And of course I spoke to Luke, Ollie and Ed from Hackney Colliery Band on the last episode, and our launch gig at Earth was really fun. It was the most epic show we've ever done with Hackney Colliery Band, well over 2 hours of music straight through. Whew, it was a long one, but a really fun one. So thank you so much if you came down. I met a few podcast listeners there, so thank you if you came and said hello. It was lovely to meet you and hope to meet more of you soon. Speaking of which, I have this big show coming up at Wilton's Music Hall. It's on the 30th of November. I'm going to get a plug in early because I'm going to announce the guests to you right now. It's frankly an insanely good lineup. First up, we have Guy Pratt. Now, if you don't know Guy's name, you will certainly have heard his bass playing because he is a bass player with a pretty much unrivaled CV as far as I can tell. He has played bass for Madonna, Michael Jackson. He's currently on tour with David Gilmour. He's the bass player for Pink Floyd. He's got an absolutely astonishing CV. He's also a really great storyteller. He's done his own comedy show. He's produced a great book about some of the anecdotes he's had from his work over the years. He has a smash hit podcast of his own with Gary Kemp called Rock on Tours. So I really suggest you check that out as well. As well as Guy Pratt, we've also got Robin Ince along. Now, if you don't know Robin, where do I start with Robin? He's been a very long time friend and inspiration for me. He does a radio show with Brian Cox called The Infinite Monkey Cage. He's been an absolute pioneer in all sorts of ways, pioneering these amazing nights which combine music and comedy and science and literature and storytelling and all manner of incredible things. It's through Robin that I've had the chance over the years to work with people like The Cure. There's a video I've just put out on my social media, which is me playing Love Cats, my arrangement of Love Cats with Robert Smith from The Cure, who of course have just released a fantastic new album. You must check it out. And it's all thanks to Robin, those sorts of shows. I've worked with astronauts. I've met Chris Lintott, who I have this occasional double act with, who's been on this show, of course. And oh yeah, I've really got Robin to thank for all of that stuff. So Robin Ince will be on the show. He's also got an incredible brain when it comes to, well, all things, but especially music. So Guy Pratt, Robin Ince, and finally Theon Cross. Now, Theon has done something which I think I would have thought impossible when I was a teenager. He has made the tuba cool. extremely cool. He's got his own project which has been enormously successful. He was a part of the band Sons of Kemet for a long time. He toured the world with that band. So many other projects he's done, amazing collaborations and all sorts of incredible stuff. So yeah, we're going to have a bit of a bass special with Theon on tuba and Guy Pratt on electric bass, who are both absolutely brilliant in their own different ways. And of course Robin, and he and I are going to be premiering some new work we've been doing together, as well as talking about his encyclopedic brain. Anyway, so that's the 30th of November at Wilton's Music Hall. There is a code, as I say, for listeners of this podcast. It's Steve Pretty F. Steve Pretty F, all one word, all uppercase, and that will get you best available seats in the house for £15. There's going to be loads of live music, loads of fascinating conversation, and I'm planning a couple more little surprises. If you came to the last one, you know, one of the surprises was a choir emerging from the audience. This one, it's not going to be that, it's going to be something different, but it's going to be no less brilliant and no less interesting and surprising, I hope. So yeah, that's the 30th of November. Do come to that if you're in London, if you can get down to the show. It's going to be really fun. If you can't get to that one, there's another one coming in January the 16th, which is also on sale right now. So you can pick up tickets for those live shows. Right. Plug over. On last episode, I mentioned that I wasn't doing a Genre Tombola, which is where I take a randomly chosen genre and pick it apart and maybe try and make some music in it, talk to people from that genre. And I didn't do that last time because I had a lot of stuff to get through with Hackney Colliery Band and Noir. But this time, I'm doing a kind of almost double Genre Tombola because I've got a bit of a German special this episode. It is still just about October. The intention behind this episode was to make it a bit of a German theme to celebrate Oktoberfest. And that is, of course, essentially the drinking festival that happens in Germany in October, but now increasingly around the world. Part of the reason I wanted to do that was I had a couple of Oktoberfest gigs. As a brass player, as a trumpet player, it's a busy time of year for those sorts of gigs. I have to say they're not gigs that I do loads of, and I'm quite happy with that, but I do a few of them. They're quite fun, but obviously they're very boozy affairs. You're drinking litre steins of beer whilst playing and encouraging other people to drink heavily too, which is, you know, I feel slightly conflicted about, but they can be fun, and there is a really interesting tradition behind it, which is what I'm going to dig into a little bit today. That tradition behind the Oktoberfest drinking bonanza, because I was in Munich back in, I think it was July, and I thought I would go to the beer halls there and try and learn a bit about the German beer hall music culture. There's a very interesting tradition of these bands that play in these great traditional beer halls, and I wanted to sort of dig into that a bit, especially as someone who does dabble with Oktoberfest gigs myself, as I say. Wanted to see how connected they are to that traditional German style of music in beer halls, and I learned essentially not really at all, at least not according to the musicians that I spoke to. So yeah, I talked to Wolfgang King over in Munich, and then towards the end of the episode I look at tech trance, inspired by a visit to Berlin a few weeks ago. I was working over in Berlin, and tech trance was the genre that was chosen for me. I think back at Also Festival in July, when I revealed the genre live, I picked it live in front of an audience, and tech trance was what was chosen. So I took my opportunity in Berlin to learn a bit about techno and trance and how they cross over. So there's going to be a bit of a tech trance track towards the end of the show. But first, before we head over to Germany, I'm going to talk about an event that's happening in London. Now, it's this Saturday, which I appreciate is quite soon after this episode is released. It's the 2nd of November. I appreciate that date may have gone by the time you listen to this. Again, this was supposed to be out a long time ago, this episode, but, you know, computers and time and all the rest of it. So anyway, if you've missed that event, don't worry, you can still donate to this fantastic cause. Go to defibfest.com. I'm going to throw it over to my friend Ian Russell, who's the founder of DefibFest. He's going to talk a little bit about why this amazing musical event is happening, what it's all in aid of, and yeah, a bit more about DefibFest. So this is Ian Russell talking about DefibFest this Saturday, the 2nd of November.
I'm Ian Russell. I'm the founder of DefibFest, one of the performers and one of the directors as well.
And DefibFest, what is that?
So DefibFest, the aim is to raise money for and awareness of public access defibrillators through the power of music. Public access defibrillators are ones that are outside buildings that can be accessed 24/7 rather than ones that go inside. So they're always there should someone need them.
What made you want to raise money for defibrillators in the first place?
So back in 2018, my dad unexpectedly had a heart attack while we were on holiday in the US. We got a call from my mum saying it had happened, a complete shock. So we rushed back, and by the time we got up to Nottingham, he was in intensive care in the hospital there. We found out that he basically collapsed walking on the way home from the shops with his morning paper walk he did every single day. Fortunately, there was a public access defibrillator literally across the road, 20 steps away. Very fortunately, two off-duty police officers were passing. They knew the defib was there, they knew how to use it, and they used it on my dad to try to help save him. Unfortunately, it didn't ultimately save him, but it gave him more of a fighting chance. And in our situation, it meant that he was able to keep going enough that he could get to the hospital, to be in intensive care. He didn't come round again, so we weren't able to have a conversation with him, but we were able to see him. I don't know why, but I think literally the day he passed, I texted everyone, you included, and just said, I want to do DefibFest to raise money for defibrillators through music, and everyone just straight away said yes. It wasn't like, oh, we need to think about this. It was just like, yes, 100%. And that really fired me up to want to do something. So we held the first DefibFest back in 2019. We raised about £3,000, which allowed us to buy 2 public access defibrillators. One was installed at a pub in Putney in southwest London, another in Barnes, also in southwest London. It felt like a great thing to have done, and an amazing achievement. Almost a year later, I had an email from London Ambulance Service on a Saturday morning, I think, saying, look, the defibrillator was used yesterday and we think it's helped save someone's life, which was absolutely amazing. I don't really think that these things are actually going to be used. After a strange chain of connections, we were in contact with the person whose life the defibrillator saved, and we met them. We talked about defibrillators. You can imagine it was just an unreal experience. And I think that fired us up even more to carry on with DefibFest. After the pandemic, we did another DefibFest, and the person whose life the defib saved came along and gave the most incredible speech about why what we're doing is so important and how it helped her and her family. Her family still has her there. They haven't gone through what we went through. That's amazing. And I think that's just fired us up to keep going.
In terms of what it is, we've talked a lot about how brilliant the cause is and why you're raising that money and that terrible loss. But it's incredible that you've turned it into this really positive thing. I just want to tell people a little bit about your background and why you chose to put on a music festival and what actually happens at the event itself.
Yeah, so I've always been in bands since I was about 15. I think you and I have been in maybe 2, 3 together.
You're known amongst our kind of group of old uni friends still to this day as The Fire.
Yeah, from we played in
from
together.
A band who played in together called The Fire.
Yeah, some people don't even know I've got a real name. I've always played in bands. Music's always been my passion. It's been everything for me. I don't know, it was just the first thing I thought of, something to do with music around this. To be honest, I just didn't give that much thought to it. It just happened, and it was like, okay, let's do it. I think one of the things that made a massive difference is having so many musical friends who were all just instantly supportive of this. But music was just like, it was just the natural thing to do. In terms of the event itself, we have an afternoon and evening where we hire a small venue in central London, a small intimate rock and roll venue, and we get bands and friends together to honestly have fun and have a good time, enjoy the music. Nice opportunity to get together with friends, play a bit of music together. There's a very serious mission behind it. It's a mix of music, first aid where we can, an amazing raffle. We're raising awareness around defibs, just trying to have a nice occasion instead of focusing too much on something that's really sad. So
it's always a really fun event. Is this the third one now then? Is that right? Yeah, that's right. One of the things I love about it, as a lover of, as I do try and do with the podcast, is smash things together that don't always necessarily sit side by side, and you certainly do that on this festival, because you have, as well as having a raffle, which is an unusual thing at a rock gig, you also have a live defibrillator demonstration, which is amazing. He's like the biggest hit of the night in my memory.
Yeah, it's true. My good friend Imran from uni has been amazing, and he adds a sense of humour and fun to first aid. He's brilliant, because it could be quite dry and not that engaging, but he's phenomenal. We have a few limitations this year around the venue, just because of the size. It's quite an intimate venue. We might not be able to do as much hands-on demoing as before, but Imran will be there again. He's hoping to share some kind of words on what we're doing and first aid generally. But yeah, you're right. I guess I never thought that how much of a rock and roll thing is a raffle. There are some awesome prizes, like some We've got acoustic guitars, we've got all sorts of things.
The music's really mixed, right? It's a real mix of stuff. So I know that you are a big skate punk fan. Yeah. So there's some skate punk there. There's a lot of rock bands. So you and I play in a band called Uber Maneuver, which sort of does what it says on the label. Last time I think there was a sitar.
Yeah, there was a sitar, which was absolutely amazing, by my good friend Anand, who was incredible. It's a really mesmerising and captivating instrument. We've had acoustic piano, acoustic guitar, Rage Against the Machine covers, hardcore music, indie covers.
It's a bit like the podcast in terms of its variety. A lot of bases covered.
I think it keeps it interesting, and what you experience changes year on year. It's not been the same bands every year. Yes, there's been some bands in common, but this year there are, I think, 3, possibly 4 new acts that haven't performed before, which is amazing.
Yeah, it's a really lovely event. Do you want to talk about the details, the date and time and all that business?
DefibFest this year is on the 2nd of November at Slim Jim's in Islington. The doors open at 4 o'clock and it'll go on until probably 11 for live music, and then one of our friends, Ed Hartwell, is doing a DJ set afterwards, so you can expect indie and rock classics there. If you want to get tickets, you can get them from defibfest.com. They're available for £10 plus a booking fee. Every single penny we raise through donations, ticket sales, raffle, goes towards buying defibrillators. So we do have admin costs of running DefibFest, but my sister and I pay for all of that ourselves out of our own pocket. Sometimes when you're donating, you don't know exactly what is happening to that money, but one of the things I'm really proud of with DefibFest is being able to say that every single penny that's raised goes towards defibs.
How many defibs have you managed to buy off the back of this festival so far?
It was 7. As of today, it's 8.
Really? One more today?
Yeah, we've raised one today. So over the last 2 years since we did the last defib, we've raised almost £1,500 in donations, including some donations for this year. There's an amazing government grant at the minute called Defib Grant. The website is defibgrant.co.uk, and the government is part funding defibrillators, which is brilliant. Normally we'd spend about £1,200 on a defibrillator and cabinet, but through the grant we've been able to buy them for £750, which is amazing. It's almost half price. We've been able to take advantage of that with some money we've had in reserve for a defib. A venue that has been incredibly enthusiastic and supportive about it. I think we first spoke to them about it last week. We moved really quickly, everything's happened, and we've got another defib out there. So that's 8 now. And
that's fantastic. Oh, congratulations.
Very close to our 9 as well. Almost ready to push a button, but got to work out some insurance details, I think. So rock and roll. But
man, what an achievement to get 8 defibs out on the road already. And again, it's worth people spending some time training up on how to use them as well at the festival or anywhere else online or in person at an event.
2 things that I've learned. DefibFest doesn't give advice on defibs. We're not qualified to do that. But 2 things that I've learned from being at these events and discussions with the London Ambulance Service. The first thing is, if there is an emergency, call 999 and they will tell you what to do. They'll tell you where the nearest defib is. If there is one, they'll send someone to help you. They will talk you through exactly what to do. So you don't need to feel like you need to know what you're doing. Call 999, they will tell you what to do, and you just follow their instructions. Public access defibrillators tell you what to do as well. They literally say, put this here, move away because there's going to be a shock, move away, you haven't put this here quite correctly. So again, you're following instructions, but also, and this is a point that the lady who spoke at DefibFest really emphasised, just do something. You can't really do anything worse than doing nothing. Several of her ribs were broken in the process. Obviously, you don't set out to do that, but it can happen. But she's here now.
Yeah.
I think it's important to know that emergency services are there to help you. Defibs help you as much as they can, and helping really can save someone's life. What
an amazing thing to use music to create such good in the world, especially after such a tragic event. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm going to be there. It should be really fun. And we're going to have to get you back on at some stage, because you also have a really interesting job as I mentioned earlier, patent lawyer. You're a patent lawyer, but you specialise in music, right? Music patents.
Yeah, exactly. Music tech. So yeah, all sorts of things. I work with music tech companies, getting patents for all sorts of things, and any sort of area where there's music technology, from software to hardware and amplifiers, generative AI, apps that do all sorts of amazing things. So for me, it's a hugely interesting area, because I get to combine my passion for patents with my passion for music.
It's great. It's an unusual combination, I think. But,
yeah, don't know how rock and roll it is.
No, it's great. I, as a big music tech lover myself, I feel like we've got lots to catch up on, because I haven't seen you for ages. Yeah. Anyway, and I'll let you go back to the world of music patents and organising festivals. I'll see you in a few days.
Sounds good, Steve. Looking forward to a practice and then playing together at DefibFest.
Nice one, man.
Awesome.
Take care.
Cheers.
And my thanks to Ian. Do check out defibfest.com. If you're available on the 2nd of November, please do come along to Slim Jim's in Islington. It's going to be a lot of fun, a lot of loud rock music, and a raffle, and a defibrillator demonstration, all for an amazing cause. I'll be there playing and hanging out and generally trying to raise some money for this great cause. So maybe see you there. So, as I mentioned, back in July, I was in Munich in Bavaria, and I thought I'd better go and check out the beer halls, when in Rome and all that. Well, actually, when in Rome, don't check out the beer halls. I would recommend checking out the Colosseum, for example. Anyway, when in Munich, check out the beer halls, because they are quite something. They're these amazing historic rooms. Obviously, they're about drinking, but they're about much more than that. They're about community, and they're about music and business even. Much like I've talked about in previous episodes when I've wax lyrical about the tradition of pub music in the UK and how important that is for the live music scene here. I'm not sure it's quite the same in Germany, in the sense that the live music scene isn't necessarily built off these beer halls, as far as I'm aware, but there is a really interesting and quite ancient tradition behind this association between music and drinking and business. Once I got my order of a large stein of Dunkelbier, of dark beer in, which was absolutely delicious, I sat and listened to the band who were playing, and there's music on pretty much all day and night, as far as I can tell, in these venues. The bands, I have to say, it surprised me how, I guess, for want of a better term, unbombastic these bands were. They were brass instruments, but played in quite a mellow way. And also, very surprisingly to me, Harp was a feature of this band who I saw and then interviewed. And also accordion features quite a lot, which I guess was maybe a bit more expected. But yeah, Harp, brass instruments, accordion, and quite mellow in the background. Anyway, here's a little taste of what they sound like. And do listen out for that harp. People are dancing, there might be a waltz they're playing, a little bit of, gentle swaying that people are doing, but mainly it functions as a kind of background music, a very enjoyable atmosphere to eat and drink and do business and be merry. And after the gig, I wanted to have a chat with the band, and their leader was very gracious and gave up some time, and of course in a second language, to talk to me about some of the history behind it, some of the different functions that the music has, and its part in Bavarian culture. So this is me outside the Hofbrauhaus in Munich, talking to Wolfgang King.
My name is Wolfgang King. I'm playing the trombone in our group, and our group is called very traditional Bavarian name, Frostdorfer Tanzelmusik. We are playing roughly about 50 years now. Two of the guys you have seen already, they started more than 50 years ago with us. The two guys are in the age of 85 years.
It's incredible. You can see in a place like this so much history with these musicians having played for 50 years. Can you tell me about the history of the beer hall here and the music that goes with it?
Yes, a little bit. That what I knew is the Hofbrauhaus originally was built up due to, how to say, to an act from the Bavarian king. Means that some 100 years ago there was a law that it was only allowed to give beers to all the inhabitants on very special areas. And in these areas also taxes apply. And that's the reason more or less that some 100 years ago the Hofbrauhaus was built up. It had an area where all the inhabitants from the Bavarian kingdom can buy the beer.
I see.
And this more or less is the reason.
And has the music been there from the start?
No. In the start there was original beer hall but without music. Also in some decades music and to have a lot of fun was also forbidden. Then another king came and then it was allowed. Then the next king said, oh, it's not that what I would like to have. For 150 years I think now everything is allowed more or less. Traditional music, and what we are playing is due to the regulations which come from the current management from the Bavarian Hofbrauhaus.
And the music you're playing, who writes this music? Who composes this music?
A lot of the titles we are playing, we wrote by our own. We wrote it to the guys we are playing in our 6-man group, so it fits very best. And some of the titles we buy it.
Yeah, it's commercial, you buy it.
And you have to license it.
The instruments you have, it's an unusual lineup. So I'm a trumpet player. I play trumpet for a living. But you have a very unusual lineup of musicians. So you have 2 flugelhorns.
Yes, that's right.
But they are unusual for me in that they have these rotary valves, so different.
That's right. These valves are more or less common here in southern Bavaria and in Austria. This kind of valves. Normally you have the one who has
pistons.
Pistons.
Yeah, this is a different style. So it looks like, those people who don't know, it looks like you're playing them sideways compared to... Because I play straight and fingers go down, whereas the instruments are kind of on their side.
It's a little bit unusual to the area where you're coming. Here in southern Bavaria, in Austria, more or less, it's common to play this kind of flugelhorn. And as you say, 2 flugelhorn, and then I'm playing the trombone.
But you're playing a valve. It doesn't look like a trombone. So my listeners would know of a trombone. We've covered it on the show as having a slide, moving your arm, but you have valves.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, you're right. The area where you can play very high tones and low tones, it's more or less the range from the trombone. But you're right with valves.
With valves, yeah. So it doesn't look like a trombone. It looks like a big trumpet.
That's right. Yeah.
So it's lovely. So you have the 2 flugelhorns. You have the trombone, the valve trombone. And you have, I was very surprised to see a harp.
Yes, a harp.
A harp that was not something I was expecting. I was expecting the brass. I was expecting, you also have an accordion. I was expecting to see that. But a harp was very surprising for me.
A harp and the accordion. Yeah. And the last is playing the tuba.
Tuba, of course. Yeah. So you have this brass and harp, and that's I have a duo with a harpist in the UK, but a very different style, of course, more sort of jazz side of things. But it's unusual to see brass and harp. So why are those?
I think the most reason is that the musician we are playing, the style, when you're using the harp, it fits the best. Of course, we, as having brass instruments, we have to play not too loud, So the mixture is having the right manner, but the harp for us, it fits the best for the whole music style.
It's very interesting because you talk about the brass not playing too loud, because it's very warm. When people, when they think of brass music, they maybe think of it as loud and aggressive. Very soft sound that you have. Everything blends together very nicely. And you can hear the harp.
Yes, you will hear it.
No amplification.
Yeah.
No microphones, right?
If you're playing on very large locations, then we have a microphone for the harp and for the accordion. For the brass instruments, you do not know it normally.
No, of course. But in this room here, to be able to hear the harp whilst you have 4 brass players playing, that's impressive. It's a beautiful warm sound. And 2 flugelhorns. So for people who don't know, a flugelhorn is the same length tube as a trumpet, but it's a little bit more mellow, more softer sound.
Yes, that's right.
So it sounds the same pitch, but it's got a different timbre, a different sound to it.
This is how to explain. This more or less this very traditional style, only in this area. You will see this kind of grouped instruments also in Tyrol, in Austria, but only in this area we play in the same range.
Interesting. How did that start?
I think it started more or less 100 or 50 years ago, because the inhabitants would like to have more fun, not just drinking beer, but also having music. And in the history, also singers were very common. And nowadays not, but in the past, small groups were assisted by a singer. And the singer sings traditional Bavarian melodies.
Interesting. Can you talk to me a little bit about the history of the Stammtisch? This is because we are in a hall in Munich.
Yes.
I have been reading about this Stammtisch tradition. You can maybe talk.
How to explain? Stammtisch tradition, a very German word. Stammtisch more or less comes also from the history, I think, also more than 100 years ago, because of the different groups, how to explain, when you are a butcher, when you have a bakery, or when you have some other things, then coming from the history, this guy, for example, 6 butchers, built up a group, and they would like to talk to each other about the same things, more or less. And then they decided once a week, we will meet us every Monday, for example, at 8 o'clock in the beer hall at the Hofbräuhaus at 8 o'clock, and then we can discuss about everything which is more or less in our group discussable.
So for business?
Yes, business talks, private talks. Yeah.
I was reading about it, and there is a Stammtisch where musicians can come and everyone plays together. Is this a thing?
Yeah, more or less. Here in the Hofbräuhaus beer hall, there are, I think, more than 50 or 60 Stammtisch groups, and they coming Monday to Sunday, more or less, in the evening, starting at 6 o'clock, 7 or 8 o'clock, and you will find it very often during working days, so Monday to Friday.
These are business people talking about business things. Yeah. And how does the music interact with that?
Sometimes it interacts because if the group, for us, has funny things to discuss, then sometimes they go to the group and they pay for a very special song, for example 10 euros, and then they wish a very special song from this Stammtisch group.
I see.
And then we play it.
Speaking of special songs, I was just saw your performance today, which was fantastic. And there is the song that you play.
Prosit. The Prosit, yeah.
Can you talk about that?
The Prosit, more or less, is a very easy song. So it means also you can sing very easily the text, and it's a tradition. When you drink your beer, then you drink it with the song.
Yeah. So just to explain what happens, you guys stand up.
Yes, we stand up, and then it's a signal for the guys. Now Prosit will come,
Yeah.
and then they sing together,
Everyone sings.
and then we drink together.
It's beautiful. It's lovely to watch. It's sort of an amazing community moment. And I suppose, speaking of community, do you play music outside of this band?
Yes.
Yeah. So you play in orchestras, or
Yes, I play in a brass band, a big brass band, the same instrument.
how does the band that you do and the music that you play here relate to the rest of the music that you do? Do you think of this as a sort of folk music?
Yes,
Right.
that's right.
It's quite different from classical music, but the same
Yes.
techniques. Is
Yes,
that right?
the same techniques, the same instrument, but this is, as you said, a very special folk music. And on our brass band, we play more or less also modern songs or brass-related songs made originally for brass bands. So it's really different.
Thank you so much for chatting to me. I have one last question, and it's a big question. What is the point of music for you?
The point of music. So, not an easy question for the last, but I will try. I think the point of music is that outside from the time you have working hours, you have the chance to play with guys where all the guys are loving the music. You forget about maybe not so good things during the working days. And in the end, you can do it also when you are very old. Yeah. And I've tried to give this impression also to my sons. Today, a son from my family was playing with us. The young man playing the second Flügelhorn.
Yes, yes.
And I carry him, for example, here to tell him this for some hours you can play. You have a lot of good guys around that. Everything is okay. And you do not have to think about working Monday. And I think that's the point of music.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Thank you so much. That's fantastic. And my thanks once again to Wolfgang King in Munich outside the Hofbrauhaus for that lovely interview. What an absolute gent. Really nice guy. And of course, he did the whole interview in lederhosen. And you can see that beautiful lederhosen in the video, which is on my Patreon. The full interview is up there in video form, as well as some video highlights from the music that afternoon. So if you head to originofthepieces.com, you can find all of that and sign up to the newsletter and the Patreon and all of that stuff. Now, up next, as I mentioned, we're going to stay in Germany because this is the second phase, if you like, of the Genre Tombola section. The first phase, I guess, is German beer hall music, and this next phase is Tech Trance. This was picked for me by the Random Genre Picker, which I did live in front of an audience at Also Festival back in the summer. Tech Trance takes its name from Techno on the tech side and Trance, of course, on the trance side. And these are both categories of EDM, electronic dance music, which is only a relatively new term, actually. I think it's only been around for 15 years or so, that overarching term of EDM. So I would say most EDM, not all of course, but most EDM electronic dance music is characterised by having a very strong importance on the kick drum, which is the bass drum in the drum kit, if you like. But of course, drum kits are not normally used in most EDM. Drum machines are, and synthesizers. So the kick drum can actually sound really different. The different sounds of different kick drums from different drum machines and different samplers and things can really affect the perception of the entire genre. So whole genres can be defined by just having a different kick sound. So to show you what I mean, here's one type of kick drum sound. And here's another. And another. And one more. So actually there's quite a big variation there that you can hear, but the function of the kick drum in most genres of EDM, and certainly my understanding tech trance, is to anchor that beat. So often you'll have a what's called 4 to the floor kick drum, so it would be like boom, 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 all the way through. Now I think we can define pretty much all music in the world in terms of tension and release, and that can be done in all sorts of ways. In classical music, for example, it's often done with harmony and how different chords interact. In Indian classical music, it's often done with the rhythmic variation of the melody and these long melodic phrases. Of course, I'm generalizing, just going through these things very quickly. But in electronic dance music, EDM and its many subgenres, I think it's characterized largely by dropping out the kick drum. and of course dropping in and out other elements too. But because the kick drum is so central to so much of this music, if you drop it out, it creates this enormous sense of expectation and anticipation, so that when it comes back in, you've got this thing called the drop, and that's where everyone goes crazy. So you've got this, you might have kick drum to start things and then build into this slightly kind of spacey bit where the kick drum is out and it gets a bit more, you know, there's more reverb and it drifts off into a little bit more of a kind of ambient mood, and then bang, the kick drum comes back in and everyone loses themselves in that beat. Now, techno and trance in a lot of ways are very different genres, so I was trying to get my head around how these two overlap and what tech trance is. Trance, I think, is characterised by some different synthesizer sounds. We haven't got time to go into them in too much depth now, but one's called a saw. That's because the waveform of the synthesizer, so that is the shape of the sound, if you like, the timbre of the sound, if we're talking in more traditional music terms, is a very spiky, right? So it's called a sawtooth. So it's a zigzag, basically. And that has got quite a harsh sound. That sounds like this. Particularly when you layer that with lots of sawtooth sounds together and slightly detune them. When multiple instruments play together, they have this kind of thickening effect. It might sound slightly out of tune, but what you're mainly hearing, what you're mainly perceiving, is a thick richness, much like a string section in an orchestra. You don't necessarily think of it as out of tune, but those tiny tuning discrepancies mean that your ear hears it as a much bigger, fuller sound than it would if it was just one saw. So here is a big detuned saw. And the other thing that characterises a lot of this music is pads. This is sort of the opposite end to the sawtooth lead. The pad is a lot more mellow, a lot more ambient. So you've got this contrast between the quite harsh synthesizer lead and the mellow, washy, ambient pads, with the kick drum and the rest of the drum machine driving through the rhythm underneath. Now the bass is very important, particularly how it interacts with the kick drum. This is something I want to dive into a lot more in future episodes, but a very important aspect of a lot of electronic music, and certainly I noticed it when I was listening to a lot of tech trance, is something called side chaining. Now we don't need to go into the ins and outs of what that is. Essentially what it means is when the kick drum hits, that sound ducks everything else. And that means that the kick drum has real prominence throughout the song. So in other words, it doesn't conflict with the bass frequencies that the bass line is playing, or any of the pads, or any of the leads, or any of the samples, or anything else, because every time that kick drum hits, it's lowering the volume just briefly of everything else. So it's like turning down the rest of the mix, but not the kick drum every time. And there's a way of, you can do that automatically using something called a compressor. But what that gives us is this sense of pumping, right? Because every time you hear the kick drum hit, it will lower everything else and then it will come back up very quickly. So that sounds like this. And of course there's a whole world we could go into there in a lot more detail, but because it's tech trance, I also need to talk about techno. So let's park trance for a second and just talk about techno. Now techno, my understanding of it is that it's got a bit of a harder edge than a lot of trance music. Trance, I guess, is you would think of as more euphoric. Techno can certainly be euphoric too. Both of these styles can be played at raves and nightclubs and stuff. Obviously that's what they're designed for. They're designed for the dance floor, and they're designed to some extent to get you into that euphoric state, often with chemical assistance, of course, in raves and nightclubs. But techno, I think, has got a bit more of a history of having a harder edge. Came partly out of cities like Detroit, but particularly Berlin. I was in Berlin for some work a few weeks ago, and so I went to check out some techno clubs. I thought I want to go and immerse myself in techno. Didn't go to any tech trance stuff. There wasn't a lot of that happening while I was there, or if there was, I had to be up early, so I couldn't rave till 5 a.m. So I didn't make it to any of those gigs, but I did go to some techno jams. Techno has got a really interesting subculture, particularly a culture of making music live. I talked a few episodes ago to Jay Chakravorty about modular synthesizers, these kind of spaceship control panel looking synthesizers without any keyboards normally, with all these knobs and buttons and flashing lights. And techno is often made using these modular synthesizers and, of course, computers, but physical instruments as well, synthesizers and drum machines that you press buttons and make noises and twiddle knobs, not just on a laptop. And in fact, I went to one of these techno jams while I was there, which was absolutely fantastic. Really interesting from the point of view of making live improvised electronic music. I had a great time. I just want to play a few little clips of this techno jam so you can hear how it's interacting. There was an interesting dynamic for the jam session because there were a whole group of people on stage, people coming on and off stage throughout. The music never stopped. That pretty much that force of the floor, relentless beat was there almost the whole time, but someone coming on, someone adding their own synthesizer lines to it, another person going off, then someone else coming on, maybe adding their drum machine ideas to it. And so there was this really interesting, organic, evolving textures that were happening live in real time. And of course, with a background as a jazz musician myself, I'm always really interested in spontaneous music making. So I was fascinated to see it happening in real time with electronic instruments. So here's a little taste of that techno jam from Berlin. Thanks to Battle of the Machines, which was at Urban Spree in Berlin. Great little club, really cool area. I mean, just very Berlin. Really, really cool. Thank you, Berlin. You're great. Well done. So yeah, it's a great city for electronic music and of course, especially techno. That's a very, very brief, broad overview of techno and trance. Of course, I'm sure people will be furious that I've left things out and made all sorts of mistakes, but there we are. I'm not going to get everything right. I'm just trying to take a bit of a fresh pair of eyes to these genres that mainly I know very little about. So, I have made a piece of music vaguely in this genre. Once again, electronic music genres are very specific, and I'm sure that I have absolutely transgressed multiple genres here, partly because I use a sample as the basis of it. Now, I've talked about sampling a bit in previous episodes, particularly the UK hardcore episode a year or so ago when I did a kind of Prodigy-inspired mashup of the podcast theme. But sampling, I guess, isn't a massive feature of a lot of trance, certainly. It's more about the synthesizers. Ditto techno, but it does come into those genres, I think I'm right in saying sometimes. Sampling is, of course, when you just basically taken a little excerpt of another tune. People sample from turntables, from records and vinyl. That's one of the ways it started in genres like hip-hop, but it is used in these other genres a bit as well. So often you'll get a vocal sample, a vocalist who's come in and sung what's called an a cappella, so in other words, just singing by themselves, or they've maybe just sung what's called a top line, so a little melody, sometimes even just a fragment of melody that's then manipulated and used in various ways throughout these songs. So, with apologies to the tech trance community and the Bavarian drinking song community, and with a quick reminder to listen out for the various features we've talked about, the synthesizers and all of that, but also particularly the sidechaining, where we're listening for that kick drum pumping the rest of the mix, bringing the mix up and down as the kick drum comes in. Here is my tech trance version of the traditional drinking song Prosit, as recorded at the Hofbrauhaus in Munich. So that was my tech trance version of the traditional drinking song Prosit, as recorded live at the Hofbrauhaus in Munich earlier this year. Now, before I reveal what the next genre that has been randomly assigned to me is, I just want to acknowledge that eagle-eared amongst you may have noticed that I have not looked at Tonas yet, which is the flamenco genre that was assigned to me quite a while ago now, I think back earlier in the summer. I have not forgotten that. In fact, I have been at something called Womex, which is a world music kind of trade expo and a series of gigs this last week. It's been really interesting, and I've spoken to lots of people trying to get to the bottom of who can talk to me about Tonas, because that is one of those genres that I feel like I really need to try and speak to an expert in. So it is coming. I am working on it. It's quite hard to find someone who I can talk to. It's been quite a challenge, but it's been really interesting along the way. So Tonas is coming. Don't worry. But meanwhile, here is the next genre that was chosen for me. I did a live podcast recording at a festival back in August called Wild Kind. Really enjoyed that and chose a genre live. So here we go, over to Wild Kind back in August. Sometimes people think I cheat it. By the way, if I cheat it, why would I pick Igbo rap from Nigeria? Obviously, I don't. I mean, it was fascinating, but obviously, I don't want to be backed into a corner where I have to rap in Igbo. So, anyway, so I have pre-copied and pasted the list into my random list picker. My laptop keeps dying this way. And I'm going to press go, and okay. So, in an episode of the podcast in a few weeks' time, I will be doing a deep dive into avant-garde metal. You heard it here first. Seriously, have we got any avant-garde metal fans in? Because it would be really handy to talk to.
My uncle has a podcast.
Is it, what's that?
My uncle does a podcast.
Your uncle does a podcast
Yeah,
about avant-garde metal? Stay, do not go anywhere. I've got another gig tomorrow, but if I don't see you after the show, I'm going to searching you out. Avant-garde metal podcast. Okay, right. I need to talk to him immediately. Okay, fine. That's good. That's done. So listen out for that and on the next episode, unless I get to Tonas first, which I may do. I'm working on both simultaneously. Anyway, just remains for me to say thank you so much for listening. Thank you once again to my contributors to this episode, Wolfgang King and Battle of the Machines, both in Germany, in different places in Germany, Munich and Berlin respectively. And of course, Angelique Kidjo and Hackney Colliery Band for the theme song. A quick reminder, get your Wilton's Music Hall tickets for the 30th of November if you haven't already. There is a special code for podcast listeners, which is Steve Pretty F, all one word. It's an absolutely killer lineup with Guy Pratt, Robin Ince, and of course Theon Cross. Theon Cross, Guy Pratt and Robin Ince on the 30th of November at that live show at Wilton's. Anyway, that's it for now. Once again, sign up for the Patreon, sign up for the mailing list, originofthepieces.com. Spread the word, and of course a nice review is always helpful. Thanks again for listening and for all your support, and I'll speak to you hopefully in a couple of weeks. You know what it's like. Bye!